Dad refused to walk me down the aisle, choosing a Hawaii trip with his favorite daughter instead. But he changed his mind the day before the wedding after what I did. I'm 26 and getting married this week. With only 5 days to go, I'm already drowning in drama, thanks to my sister and dad. My dad's been a single parent for the last decade since my mom passed away after a long battle with cancer when I was 16. That was tough on all of us, but especially for me. It felt like I'd lost my main ally, and my sister would now have free rein to boss me around. My mom had always been fair with both of us, but my dad definitely favored my sister. After Mom died, she could get away with anything. Things weren't so easy for me. My sister, Megan, is 2 years older than me and 100 times more entitled and irritating than anyone I know. When we were younger, she treated me like her personal assistant. Anytime I pushed back, my dad would just tell me to do what she asked, because she was supposedly too fragile to handle things herself. That was nonsense, but my dad bought it every time. Megan had been a sickly child, but by the time she grew up, she was perfectly healthy. Still, she loved to act like she was always on the verge of getting over a cold or some other minor illness just to get out of doing chores. As a result, I was left to do all the housework. My dad was always too tired after work, and I didn't want to stress him out more, so I just did it. Megan, meanwhile, lounged around in her room all day. It drove me crazy. Things got better after I turned 18 and left for college. I didn't have to live with her anymore. We didn't stay in touch after college, mostly because I couldn't stand her. Besides forcing me to do all the work, she was insufferable to be around. She'd constantly take jabs at me and try to push my buttons just for fun. Moving out was a huge relief. I miss my dad, but I wasn't about to sacrifice my peace of mind to live under the same roof with them. I know it might sound strange that I got along with my dad despite his obvious favoritism toward Megan, but we did have a solid bond back then. I wasn't a pushover with him, though. I'd always speak up when he went too far, and we had plenty of arguments over how he treated Megan. But at the end of the day, he was still my dad, and we'd eventually make up. I met my fiancé, Alex, in college. After dating for 8 years, we decided this year was the perfect time to get married. We're both in stable places in our careers, and everything just fell into place. I can't say the same for Megan, though. She's been struggling and recently moved back in with our dad. After she graduated, she lived on her own for a few years. Then last year, she quit her job to join a jewelry business with a friend. Unfortunately, they jumped in without doing any real research or preparation. The whole venture was doomed from the start. They blew through their investment money, which mostly came from family and friends, and couldn't turn a profit. The business folded and Megan, having already quit her job, was left unemployed. It's been 6 months, and she hasn't even started job hunting. She's completely dependent on our dad now. He was planning to retire soon, but that's no longer an option since he's supporting her financially. This has been a major point of contention between us. I think he should push her to get a job, because she can't keep living off him indefinitely just because one business venture failed. But my dad insists she just needs time to recover emotionally before she commits to anything. We've agreed not to discuss it since it only leads to fights. To complicate matters, I got engaged a couple of weeks after her business shut down, which my dad believes has added to her misery. He thinks she's upset because her younger sister is thriving while she's struggling to even get out of bed. I'm certain she's jealous of me. She makes it clear on social media, where she constantly posts as if the entire world is against her. Anytime someone comments on her posts, which are clearly attention-seeking, she mentions how I'm doing great while she's stuck in a rut. She claims I only got ahead by manipulating people, which couldn't be further from the truth. I've worked hard for everything I have. Megan, on the other hand, plays the victim and refuses to take responsibility for her own mistakes. To be fair, she did suffer one real loss recently. About 3 weeks ago, her 15-year-old cat passed away. She'd had that cat for as long as I can remember, and they were very attached to each other. Understandably, it hit her hard. Megan was naturally devastated after her cat passed away, and my dad told me she was in such bad shape that I started feeling sorry for her. Honestly, I wanted to offer my condolences, but I didn't want to come off as insincere. Instead, I asked my dad to pass along my message. She had already been battling depression, and losing her cat made things worse. She stopped eating for days, And my dad had to beg her just to get out of bed. It was really sad. And I felt bad for both of them, but with the wedding only weeks away, I was too swamped to get involved. I stayed in touch with my dad and comforted him when he was upset about Megan's behavior. But that was all I could manage. I didn't expect this to turn into a problem for me until a few days ago my dad called to tell me he wouldn't be able to walk me down the aisle. I had assumed it would be him, but I'd still called the day before to formally ask him. I expected him to say yes right away, but he told me he needed time to think. That was a red flag. The next day he called back and declined, and his reasoning floored me. Apparently, Megan wanted to scatter her cat's ashes in Hawaii on my wedding day. She had cremated the cat weeks ago, and now she wanted to take the ashes to a beach because she had good memories from a trip there a few years ago with friends and the cat in tow. The day of my wedding marked exactly 1 month since the cat's passing, and she claimed it was a special day for her. My dad told me he couldn't walk me down the aisle or even attend my wedding because Megan asked him to go with her for emotional support. This was the first time in weeks she'd shown interest in doing anything, and he didn't want to discourage her. I was furious, but I tried to stay calm. I suggested Megan ask a friend to go with her or delay the trip by just 1 day so my dad could still attend. I wanted at least one parent at my wedding. My dad said he'd already made those suggestions, but Megan got upset and accused him of not caring about her feelings. She claimed I'd have plenty of people around me on my wedding day, but she only had our dad and deserved to be the priority because of everything she was going through. When my dad said he agreed with her, I lost it. I reminded him that Megan had always been his priority, so it was no surprise he was ditching me on my wedding day for her. Before he could say anything else, I hung up and blocked him everywhere. I was devastated and cried for 2 days. Alex was supportive and understood why I was upset, but I couldn't just sit there and wallow. I decided to hit back in a way I knew would get under my dad's skin. Megan was playing mind games, so I figured I'd return the favor. I asked my uncle, my dad's twin brother, to walk me down the aisle. My dad and uncle absolutely loathe each other. Growing up, I saw how nasty they got at family events, always trying to one-up each other. It made things awkward for everyone. My grandparents tried to intervene, but their hatred ran deep. They eventually stopped attending the same events after my mom died. I didn't have anything against my uncle, though we weren't particularly close. Still, I understood what it was like to have a sibling you despised. When I asked him, he was shocked and said he didn't think we were close enough for something like that. I told him the real reason. I wanted to upset my dad. That was all the convincing he needed. He even laughed and said he'd never turn down a chance to humiliate his brother, even in his 50s. We agreed to post about it so word would get back to my dad. That evening, I shared a post about how grateful I was. I posted my gratitude to my uncle for agreeing to walk me down the aisle, and within hours I got a phone call from my dad. I'd unblocked him just for this. As soon as he reached out, he made it clear how upset he was that I'd even thought of involving my uncle. He couldn't believe I was replacing him with that guy of all people. He said he'd talk to Megan and convince her to delay scattering the ashes, but only if I agreed to let him take his place at my side. He was insistent that it would be humiliating and insulting if my uncle walked me down the aisle when he was alive and perfectly capable. I reminded him that he'd had his chance and chose Megan over me. Now he was just getting a taste of his own medicine. He accused me of being petty and immature, and I didn't deny it. I told him he was right. That admission seemed to upset him even more. By the end of the conversation, he was in tears, saying he never thought I'd act this way just because he was trying to be there for Megan, who was struggling far more than I was. He went on to accuse me of being heartless and pure evil, claiming my sister had lost everything and couldn't even have her dad's support for 1 day. His words hit me. I started feeling guilty. He wasn't wrong that Megan had lost a lot, so now I need to know, should I apologize to him? Was I in the wrong for asking my uncle to walk me down the aisle after my dad backed out for Megan's trip? Update 1. With 2 days left until the wedding, I've decided to walk myself down the aisle. It's just not worth the hassle anymore. After reflecting, I realized I'll probably be walking through life on my own anyway, so this felt right. I talked to my uncle about it, and since we'd already gotten the reaction we wanted from my dad, he was totally fine with stepping back. He'd never been eager to walk me down the aisle in the first place, so returning to being a guest didn't bother him at all. I also sent my dad a message, no phone call, because that would have just turned into another fight. I told him he was welcome to attend the wedding, but he didn't need to walk me down the aisle. I also made it clear that if he chose to go to Hawaii with Megan instead, I'd be cutting ties with him for good. He's had plenty of chances to show that he values me, and he's failed every time. I refuse to tolerate this level of disrespect any longer. I want to get married with a clear head and be happy. On my big day, I've wasted too much time worrying about how he or anyone else feels when he's never cared about how I feel. If he'd cared, he wouldn't have dropped this bomb on me just days before my wedding. And if he'd felt even a little remorse, he would have apologized after getting my message, but he hasn't. Alex and I talked about it, and he agrees this is the right decision. With just a few days left before the ceremony, I don't think I have any other choice. Update 2. I got married yesterday. It still feels unreal. I'm married with a wedding band next to my engagement ring. I'm so happy right now, though I hate that I have to think about my dad and Megan again, but I owe you all an update, and a proper one since my last post was more of a rant. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, my dad didn't attend the wedding from what I know. He went with Megan to scatter her cat's ashes in Hawaii. Yep, a beach trip for a dead cat took precedence over my wedding. I don't even want to go down that road, especially since I got so much hate for supposedly not taking Megan's depression seriously. Look, I do feel bad for her. Depression is awful. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, not even Megan, who happens to be my worst enemy. But this wasn't just depression at play here. Megan thrives on making everything about her. She could have waited a few more days or done this sooner. But no, she had to choose my wedding day. I refuse to believe that timing was accidental. She's always had it out for me, so I'm not buying the "it's just depression" excuse. It may explain her behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. I'm not making fun of her struggles, but I'm also not giving her a free pass just because she's going through a hard time. As for my dad, I don't even know what to say anymore. He let me down again. What a shock, and this time I'm done. It's hard to face a future without any parental support, but let's be honest, he's never really been in my corner. It's always been about Megan, and now I see that clearly. I was foolish to think anything would ever change. He didn't even tell me he wouldn't be there until after the ceremony. Clever. Huh? Until the ceremony. I was still confused about whether or not my dad would show up. I had left him a message earlier, but he never replied. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping for a response. After I walked down the aisle, and the ceremony was over, it finally hit me. He wasn't coming then. Right at that moment, I got a text from him saying he was in Hawaii with Megan. He claimed he'd chosen to attend the scattering of her cat's ashes because she needed him more than I did. According to him, Megan was more emotionally dependent on him, and he hoped I would understand. Honestly, I might have appreciated that explanation if he hadn't also said that my petty and immature behavior with my uncle had put him off, and he thought it was best for us to stay apart for a while. That was another reason he didn't show up. Sure, I'll admit it was petty, but I only acted that way because I felt ignored since my mom passed. I'm not going to pretend I was mature about it. But what else could I do? I wanted to see if he cared. Maybe he did. But it wasn't enough for him to show up for me. His message irritated me, especially since it was my wedding day. I didn't want him ruining my happiness, so I just blocked him and moved on with my day. He'd already chosen not to attend, so sending that message was unnecessary and redundant. People did ask me about why my dad and Megan weren't at the wedding. I chose to be honest and told them the real reason. To me, this reflected badly on them, not me, so I had nothing to hide. Most people were shocked, speechless, and a few found it darkly funny. By now, my whole family knows that my dad skipped my wedding to go scatter the ashes of Megan's cat. He couldn't spare one day for me, and that's his greatest failure as a father. Despite all this, I had a great time. My wedding day will still be the happiest day of my life so far, and nothing can take that from me. Now, I get to spend the rest of my life with the man I love the most. Alex is my family now, and I've decided he'll be my only family moving forward. Update 3. It's been a week since my wedding, and it still feels amazing to say that I'm married. Alex and I are about to leave for our honeymoon in a couple of days. But of course, my dad and Megan couldn't let me enjoy my happiness in peace. They decided now was the perfect time to confront me about what I'd been telling people at the wedding about their absence. 3 days ago, Megan texted me. I hadn't blocked her, only my dad, but after reading her message, I was tempted to block her too. It was just so infuriating how she acted like she had the moral high ground. Just to clarify, the only reason I haven't blocked her is that I still want to know if something happens to my dad. Despite everything, I trust that Megan would inform me if he had an accident, fell ill, or something else happened. That's literally the only reason I've kept the line open. I know many people would tell me to cut contact entirely, but I can't do that. Just because my dad has been a terrible father to me doesn't mean I need to be a terrible daughter to him. It might not make sense to most, but these are my morals, and I'm sticking to them. I'd appreciate it if people didn't comment on that decision. Now to Megan's message, she said, "Hey, we just got back from Hawaii, and several relatives have already reached out to tell us that they think it was wrong for us to scatter my cat's ashes on the day of your wedding. I'm not surprised that you told everyone about it and painted us in a negative light. But I'm disappointed that you're still picking on me during such a difficult time in my life. I wish you'd shown more compassion, knowing what I'm going through." She went on to add, "I really hoped you would have more empathy, but clearly, that's not the case. Dad also noticed you blocked him, and he's very upset. You should undo that, honestly. You need to be more thoughtful. You can't go through life only thinking about yourself and expect people to be fine with it. I hope you understand what I'm saying and apologize, but even if you don't, I won't be surprised. If you're still choosing to hate me during this time, there's very little I can expect from you." The tone of her message pissed me off. The content? I don't even want to get into it because I might just end up cursing her out here. It was so self-righteous and condescending that I seriously considered blocking her right then and there. But after sitting with it for a while, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of reacting emotionally, I crafted a response and sent it back. Hey Megan, I did tell our relatives why you and Dad weren't at the wedding. I chose honesty because I'm not a liar by not showing up. You both put yourselves in that position. It's unfair to expect me to cover for you, especially considering the circumstances. You've both been nothing but unkind to me lately. You couldn't even think about me on my wedding day or try to prioritize me just for that one day. Because of all that, I don't feel I owe you an apology. If Dad is upset that I blocked him, he should have thought things through beforehand, rather than regretting it now. My mind's made up. I want no contact with either of you. I'd appreciate it if you didn't reach out unless there's an emergency. If something urgent comes up, feel free to text or call. But if it's not urgent, I have no interest in talking to either of you. Both of you have hurt me deeply over the past few years. I agree with Dad. It's best if we spend time apart for now. I'm a married woman, and I want to enjoy my life with my husband right now. He's my only family. I wish you both the best. Goodbye." I showed the message to Alex before sending it, and a few minutes later Megan replied. She said she'd respect my wishes but added that Dad was still really upset about my decision to cut contact. But honestly, I can't do anything about that. They brought this on themselves. Megan's probably happy she doesn't have to deal with me anymore. And if Dad's truly upset, well, too bad. He made his choices, and now he's living with the consequences. Anyway, I'm done worrying about them. I'm focusing on enjoying my honeymoon now. Alex and I have been planning this trip for so long, and I deserve to relax and have some fun.